Welcome, bienvenue, welcome once again to another exciting edition. I injected far too much energy into that. A lovely edition of Cladding Matters, featuring, of course, Hamish McClay of Search Convey, Zara Oliburgos next to law, Wendy Gibson of the First Time Buyers Club, and of course, last but by no means least, Steve Day of the buildingsafetyscheme.org. And we talk about all matters not just to do with cladding, but really affecting people as they are out there. I have no idea why I've disappeared off the screen, but I shall put myself back on presently. However, what should be noted is that I would first of all like to bring Hamish McClay to be first in the fray.
Well, there's nothing unusual in that, and quite welcome, Gareth. We're speaking today about something which we brought up from time to time, but we haven't necessarily spoken on this as a specific topic. It has been mentioned as we go past, and very often, and this has happened. I do recollect. I used to be a teacher many decades ago, and we used to teach mathematics. No, we don't teach mathematics anymore. It's maths, and it's there's all sorts of different wonderful things that we actually sort of do now that we never taught previously, only because it seems such a good idea. It's a long time since I've been teaching, I guess, but it seems a good idea to include them in the syllabus 35, 40, 50 years ago. We wouldn't be including those in the syllabus any longer because we don't tend to measure. I don't know why, actually, because we're not part of the European community any longer. But we don't measure things in feet and inches. So we took those out of the math syllabus, and quite rightly too, in some respects. But I love them to bits. There's nothing like 1 shilling and 6pence added to, £1, 17 shillings and 8pence to add those in your head, which you had to do when I was a little bit younger. So we don't do that. The cash registers can't cope anyway. Never mind anything else. But the same thing happens with standards, which seems to be a good standard. I mean, we actually look at the standard. We won't speak about standards of education. That's another topic entirely. But we will speak about building standards or aspects of standards pertaining to building. Something which came out, and unfortunately, we do have to remember a lot of stuff came out very, very quickly within the Building Safety Act. It wasn't actually fully investigated. It didn't take the time it should have done because it would have probably still been going now if they discussed all matters which came up. But one of the things that came out as a consequence of that was a standard. We call it a standard. It's actually very much below standard, but it's called PAS 9980. And it's allegedly a publicly acceptable standard. I don't know heck for, because it doesn't satisfy the integrity of buildings in order to prevent actual sort of fire or serious aspects taken into consideration by mortgage owners, or I should say the mortgage providers or insurance companies. They will actually sort of say anything to the PAS standard of a particular one, if not actually sort of applied fully professionally, will in actual fact be very, very much below an adequate standard. And this is what we're speaking about today. And of course, we've got people in there. We've got people with this, I should say, that everybody who listens in will actually sort of know. They have experience of trying to help people. Two of our guests today, both Wendy and Zara, work very, very hard at actually sort of helping people to get into properties. They want to ensure that they're risk-free. And of course, we've got Steve there who's living in one which is full of absolute risk because things like the PAS 9980 hasn't been actually applied appropriately, or will not, the way the builders want to do it, be applied appropriately to the building where he lives.
Zara, welcome. Is PAS 9980 actually fit for purpose?
I think you best direct that one to Steve.
I will do eventually, but I know that if I do, it will be a rightful diatribe. So I thought I'd throw it at you first.
Yeah, outside of a conveyancer's remit, unfortunately.
But you
double
find
check.
we're finding that standards don't seem to be fit for purpose in general. So it must make it really difficult for you to see people putting themselves in positions where they're going to fall foul of these things. You could even tell it ahead of time that it was going to happen. You warn them, and yet they want to run straight head forth into it. Yes.
Yes.
Well,
At the end of the day, we need to give people some common sense advice, which is, not just to rely on fire risk assessments. Think about it practically. If you're in a high-rise building and the lift doesn't work, if something happens to you and you become incapacitated, how are you going to get out of the building? Who do you get hold of to help you out of the building? Stay put doesn't always work if, the building hasn't been built properly in the first place. But, a lot of, this is not part of the conveyancing remit to check the standard of construction. We're relying on certificates being given to us to say that the building's safe.
Wendy, you must find that it must be very frustrating. First-time buyers out there wanting to jump on there, and the hurdles that they have to climb over are often to do with building safety as much as anything else.
Sadly, along with quite a lot of aspects of home buying, first-time buyers in particular are often unaware of safety issues when it comes to cladding, for example, or the Building Safety Act in itself. So my concern is that it's a sector of the market which can quite often be taken advantage of, which is what I'm trying to help them avoid. So exactly as Zara said, we are there, the mortgage lenders, the buyers, the insurance companies are all there to try and they have to rely on the paperwork and be confident that the paperwork is trustworthy and actually reflects building state to the level of safety that it's at. So when we find that things like the law that's come in, or this PAS 9980 is open to interpretation and open to leaving dangerous cladding on the buildings, it does beg the question whether it actually needs to be addressed. It was obviously put in place because, or really quickly, because it was a knee-jerk reaction after Grenfell, but a mature government would recognize if there's inadequacies within it, if there's holes or loopholes that can make developers avoid having to do all the work that they should be doing. They really should be looking at readdressing and closing those loopholes.
Steve, now I know we're fighting against dodgy Wi-Fi, but PAS 9980, surely this is becoming a laughingstock.
Yes, I do apologise for my Wi-Fi. I'm afraid it may not be too good, but let me know if you can't hear me.
Slight delay, it's fine. Keep going.
Okay, so PAS 9980 basically ignores building regulations at the time of construction. So it ignores the state of the building in terms of how lawfully it was built. That's the first thing. Secondly, it allows combustible material that's banned on high-rise buildings, because all combustible material is banned on buildings above 80 meters. It ignores the current regulations and allows that material to stay on. And the cost of that is high insurance. And that's where residents like me are paying £6,000, £7,000 a year insurance. Service charge, but a large proportion of that is insurance. And that is going to continue unless these remediations are done properly. And I think the PAS standard needs to at least give you the same protection as for new buildings. And if that was done, then we would be in a much better situation with the insurance and sellability wise, and also safety wise, because frankly, why is it banned on new buildings and allowed on existing?
It does make no sense to me. I mean, the truth of the matter is, it doesn't matter whether it's a new building or an old building. safety is safety, and just how many human lives are, is it worth?
Have a good
Marvelous.
good weekend. Yeah.
All right. Well, look,
Sorry, guys.
not at all. Not at all. Let me
Yeah,
pass.
no. I can come back. I can come back. So I mean, basically, we're in a situation where residents are being ignored, builders are being protected and limiting their liability with this watered down standard. And the only way forward is for the standard to be reformed. It is currently being reviewed. So therefore, why not tighten it up to conform with the current regulations? And that, for me, would end the two-tier market. And it just seems a really reasonable thing to ask.
It does seem reasonable, but your fight has been going on for some time, and only recently we've noted that the council aren't willing to even agree to the fact that the fire the fire prevention specialists have stated it's the staircases in your building aren't up to standard, were never up to standard, and continue not to be up to standard, and they state that there's no fault to be found.
Well, yeah. So we had a surprising email this week, and the council said there's no evidence of any building regulation breaches at the time of construction. Well, that flies in the face of the London Fire Brigade enforcement notice that said there were compartmentation issues with the fire shafts, therefore illegal, unlawful. So if that isn't a building regulation breach, then why issue the notice? And secondly, we've had Weber, the cladding manufacturer, come in and investigate the cladding, and they condemned that it's not meeting their safety specifications. So that means that it wasn't lawfully installed, and another set of building regulation breaches. And thirdly, we've got a series of reports talking about internal compartmentation issues between flats. That's the walls between flats. And they said, there's missing fire stopping. Again, those were fire safety regulations that were breached. So how the council, and I have asked them in writing for them to explain why they believe there's no evidence, and why they haven't come to us for that evidence before making a finding. But it's another example of how a local authority, we've got the 7 missing London Fire Brigade enforcement notices, we've got that, so potentially the London Fire Brigade too, all not really taking the safety of residents very seriously and making findings which are quite alarming when the evidence doesn't back it up. So, let's see where this goes. But it's not good, is it? Residents are being ignored yet again, just like Grenfell.
It beggars belief. Hamish, I've just been reviewing, thank you, Zara, for pointing it out to me, a statement made by UK Finance, which basically states that they're outlining measures to facilitate mortgage lending on flats. Basically, mortgage lending resumption from January the 9th, EWS1 form validity, invalid EWS1 signatories, which we all know where that came from, and supporting organizations. Does this mean that there is some sort of optimism in the market from this?
No.
Okay, thank you for that. And moving on. No optimism? I thought that this shows some sort of waking up to the fact that we need to take all this into account.
The problem is we've been waking up every morning since Grenfell to the fact that certain things went wrong. And nothing has actually been done in far too many arenas to actually improve on that. Right. There are still people living in flats that they shouldn't be living in because of the dangers, the potential danger of them. We still don't know the full potential of the dangers in some, as we speak so often, until you take the cladding off. In very many cases, you can't actually tell what it's like beneath that. And there are dangers beneath cladding. We're speaking about what's happened with the cladding and what should be happening with that. What I really want, because I wanted to emphasize the point on that particular standard, which is a non-standard. It depends how you look at it. There are British standards. I mean, I worked in engineering, and many other people are familiar with engineering and engineering practice and what goes on with automotive manufacture, there are British standards that you have to manufacture to.
Right.
You adhere to those standards. And it would be exactly the same if you are improving on a car. If you're repairing a car, there are British standards that you have to adhere to. And if you fail to do that, there are consequences, and they're usually financial consequences. Cars have to be recalled and all sorts of things, but the building is not the same. But there is not a British standard, this PAS 998. It is, and it's not acceptable, really, in the form that it's being interpreted to cut out the dangers of fire spreading. This is the big danger, because it does not prevent fire spreading. And until that's actually changed, it needs to be reinvestigated and a new standard appraised. It would be better if it were a British standard, because then, of course, there could be consequences if it wasn't adhered to. Because, to be quite honest, the PAS 9980 enables builders to hide behind something which in itself does not offer protection to people residing in those particular sort of properties, unless certain matters are adhered to. They ignore the obvious. And we've got a situation, and we know one of them, and it will happen in many others. It's being suggested that this standard is perfectly adequate, but they have not tested the materials that are being left behind. You have to test if the materials are fire resistant, fine, but they aren't testing them. They're actually going to just leave them there without having tested them or proving the fact that they are themselves fire resistant. It's a code of practice, yes, it's rather than being a standard. And that's really the code of practice is not working. It is not effective. And that's really, we just want to draw attention to the fact that it does need to change.
So, Steve, PAS 9980 being a code of practice is basically, try and colour within the lines, but if you can't, well, no matter. It doesn't appear to be worth the paper it's written on.
Exactly. It actually says some very interesting things in the actual text of this code of practice. It says, one, it's subjective. Two, it says it shouldn't be relied upon where the principal objective is a zero risk to life. So my question is, how many deaths are acceptable to this so-called code of practice? How much do you want to, what do you want to do there? It also says, that it ignores building regs at the time of construction, because you take a holistic approach to the building, whatever that means. And we've always argued that if you're going to retain combustible material that's banned on new buildings, then you should at least know what the product is and have some fire performance test evidence to know the risk of leaving it on. Because I think it's reasonable to say, if you're following a risk-based approach, you should know what the risk is for anything you leave on. Well, that's not what they are claiming that they do. They say, well, we don't know what the product is. We don't really know how it performs in a fire. We're going to pack your 16-story fire shafts at Royal Artillery Quays full of this stuff, and you can enjoy the risk, and so can your insurers, who will make you pay the price. This is what we're looking at. This building industry is out of control. And do you know what? This week in Construction Inquirer, a nice building magazine, the builders are up to more tricks. They're asking for the Gateway 2 submission process and the building safety regulator to be delayed until after they've built most of the buildings. So instead of beforehand, they're going to do it at the end. What kind of regulator is going to say no when you've got 12, 10-story blocks of flats on some harbour somewhere? I mean, come on, this is about putting the pressure on the building safety regulator to basically approve all this stuff after they've been built. I mean, it's ridiculous. And that's where the industry is. They believe they're protected, and in many ways they are. And we need to change that. That's why we're doing the consumer protection legislation to say, you're not above the law, and if you break the law, there are consequences. And unfortunately, this standard flies in the face of everything the Building Safety Act is trying to do. It's saying ignore the regulations, this overrides it, you don't need any test evidence, take a subjective, holistic approach. It's everything that's wrong with the disaster of the last 30 years of building being allowed to continue under the name of speeding up remediation. We can't let this happen, and this is the great work of you guys on this podcast. They're making sure that they're not going to get away with this easily. And in our case, not at all, because we're going to give them some hell
I mean, it's interesting when Hamish first came to me and said we should have podcasts. It was really about the education angle. It was so that we could tell people perhaps more information they already knew, so they can make better decisions. But now it's become pointing at the laughing stock and hoping it makes a difference. I'm not sure that it is. To quote Zara, it's a bit like Pirates of the Caribbean. It's the code, guidelines, not actual rules. Zara, this nuttiness, isn't it? How can you run any form of business based around what appears to be no more than vapors?
Yeah, it's baffling, isn't it? It's you know, the rules and regulations, laws are in place to keep people safe,
right?
And yet everyone's just trying to find a way around it, to cut corners, to speed up house building. You know, what is the point in building all these properties if they're going to fall down just as quick, and if they can be burnt to a crisp just as quick?
They'll have spent the profits by then, so it should be fine. Wendy, is there a way through this that you can see that doesn't involve ripping the rest of what little hair I have out?
I think on a positive note, exactly as Steve said, it's about awareness. It's about trying to educate people. It's trying to make sure that people are more informed so that they can make better decisions. Firstly, from my perspective, for first-time buyers, whether they're umming and ahhing about whether to buy a house or a flat, maybe if the flat that they're interested in, there are risks in terms of cladding, in terms of remediation, etc. They might be better off looking at a house. I'm not saying that all houses are equal either. It really is down to a case-by-case basis. But the more we can inform people, the more we can raise awareness of this, the better they can make decisions for themselves.
So, publicly available, but not publicly acceptable. Hamish, would you care to take us home?
Well, I think that speaks, that sort of said, it is something somebody's written down. You can actually sort of take it with a pinch of salt, or you can, there will be people who even cut corners with the cutting of corners. And sadly, all we do know, and this did actually come up in our conversation yesterday within the podcast, there are people within the industry who are aware, who are willing to manufacture to safe standards. And they will actually continue to do that. And hopefully that will grow. But all this particular, all of the stuff that's written down about, we're going to be doing this, this is what we want to promote, it isn't actually happening until people take action on the ground. So when builders do start doing what they should be doing, and the truth does actually come out, hopefully people avoid those builders that continue to lie, because they do lie. And I do think probably next week would be a good week to actually be discussing the very fact that councils are coming up to in what way are they qualified to actually sort of say there is nothing wrong with this particular sort of building, when they have the council, in some instances they do employ them, building inspectors, and building inspectors aren't getting it right. How on earth can a member of the council get it right who has no experience in building whatsoever? So we'll perhaps speak about that next week.
Well, in a world where lying has become the new currency, and apparently it's councils are unwilling to disrupt anything, they'd rather let sleeping dogs, which aren't sleeping but apparently sleeping, lie. It seems an absolute shame, but we will keep rousing and raising the banner as we do always on Cladding Matters. And I just want to reach out to any of you out there who feel insecure or worried about this. There are people like Steve, Wendy, Zara, and Hamish fighting on your behalf to try and raise the standard. And that is everything that we should be acceding to. Until next week, please try and keep your feet on the ground. Keep reaching for the stars. You might catch the moon on the way. And look after that mental health. Until then, take care. Goodbye.
There's a tale about some folks with hammers and some nails. They'll polish through the moon, but they're